Yeah, hi, 911. I'd like to report the death of a political campaign. Last night's debate, ladies and gentlemen, consultants and pollsters, political analysts and strategists, is exactly why they don't want Tim Walz doing interviews. Look no further than this answer.
You said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said.
First, the awkward pause, but I misspoke? No, misspeaking is when you say this.
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it.
So the memes are endless. That's misspeaking. Your lie about Tiananmen Square and when you were there, that's a lie. You just can't admit it. Look, I think JD Vance did a magnificent job. But the one thing I would have done differently if I was JD Vance, and this is constructive criticism because I loved it, was right after that. I would have gone after Walz on stolen valor allegations. Hey, Tim, you said you carried weapons of war at war. Care to correct that? No? Okay, how about correcting the rank at which you retired at? What was that rank again? Oh, was it Command Sergeant Major, as your coin that you had made said? No, it wasn't. Or you dipped out of your unit's deployment to Iraq. Care to explain that? No, you don't want to do that either. How about your coaching position? Was it the head coach? Or were you actually the assistant coach? Tim, you said that Amber Thurman would be alive if it weren't for Georgia's abortion restrictions. Do you want to tell the audience how she really died? Oh, right. She died from the abortion pill that your party wants to hand out for free, without parental consent sometimes, to kids in school. She died of sepsis after taking the pill because she, 1, waited too long to see a doctor, 2, because when she finally got to the hospital, she had to wait 20 hours for a very legal medical procedure, not because of abortion laws, but rather because your running mate, Tim, Kamala Harris, imported 184,000 illegals just into the Atlanta area that were overrunning that ER. Drop that mic, yield your time to him to answer those questions. I would have absolutely hammered him on that. But JD took a much more cordial approach, which succeeded in its intended purpose. And what was that? What was the main demo that Trump was trying to win over last night? Suburban women. And JD Vance delivered that. My wife was ready to buy the JD Vance shirtless 12-month calendar. I tell you, if JD Vance had been single, I think she would have left me, moved to Ohio, and married him last night. His performance was brilliant in that category. But you know what wasn't brilliant on the part of the moderators? Despite the agreed-upon rules of no real-time fact-checking, they tried to fact-check JD Vance anyway. And he made sure it was the last time they did.
Just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank you,
Margaret. The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand.
And then they cut his mic, by the way. That was the last time they did that. But they didn't even try to fact-check Tim Walz on any of this.
Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis. Prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. $6,000 child tax credit. We have one in Minnesota. Reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000.
Paints a pretty rosy picture, but it's not that accurate. But what are the actual policies in Tim's state? Minnesota has one of the highest tax burdens in the country, of which Tim Walz made them even higher, which is interesting enough. In fact, it's one of the most expensive places to start, own, or operate a business, and that doesn't even include the risk of getting it burned down like it did during the BLM riots. In fact, as of January 1st of this year, Minnesota has the highest state income tax or corporate income tax at 9.8%. Also, individual income taxes in Minnesota are the 6th highest in the country. You want that vision for America? I sure don't. Hard pass, buddy. And these ladies, the moderators, making a combined like $15 million a year with like $100,000 clothing allowance. Talk about the least relatable women in the world to pick to moderate this debate. You think they give a damn about rural America? No way. They wouldn't last 5 minutes on a farm. Imagine asking them to try to milk a cow. Actually, better yet, send them to milk a bull. They think all that trans stuff is real. They would freeze to death if they had to split firewood for warmth. They didn't even bother to ask Tim Walz about this.
Away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. Just do the damn work.
You might think that America would want to know a bit more about that stance from a guy who went to China between 16 and 34 times. We don't actually know because that number keeps changing. What did he mean by that? We didn't have that conversation because the moderators didn't let us. We also didn't have the conversation about this.
I use this line on this. Just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place.
Oh, Timmy. All right, that is mighty libertarian of you. Where was that mentality when it came to mandating people get the vaccine? You fired people in your state for that. Or people's First Amendment right to, peaceably assemble on their own porch when he sent his police officers to shoot people in the face with paintballs who are on their own property. But this was the line. This was the line of the night that I think was massively overlooked.
A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world.
I have been waiting for someone to say that for I don't know how long. JD Vance just highlighted the problem with everything in D.C. We have too many people who have read about stuff in books and academia, but not enough people who've actually done it. That is why Washington is broken. And the entire debate, I just kept thinking, can you imagine Tim Walz negotiating with some foreign leader? They would think something's wrong with him. Everyone knows that VP debates usually don't move the needle. Hell, I had to look up who Mitt Romney's running mate was this morning because I honestly didn't even remember that it was Paul Ryan. This one, though, this debate, I think this debate will go down in history. Vance's performance will be noted as the gold standard for the next 5 presidential election cycles. It was like a scene out of Rocky IV with Ivan Drago and the coach, throw the towel! That's literally how Nicole Wallace responded.
It's the audacity. I agree with you that we're in year 9 and no one knows how to cover the audacity. The audacity is that someone should have said, stop it, stop. Are you effing kidding me? And they should have dropped that F-bomb, right? I mean, they should have just, this is a debate. This may be the only chance people have to see the difference.
I am so here for that meltdown. Prior to last night, the media actually believed their own narrative. That Vance was the weird one. Look at these 2 pictures. Who do you think was the weird one last night, Anderson Cooper? Do you see why Walz's entire family is not voting for him? Do you see why his entire upper echelon of the unit he served with, that he didn't go to Iraq with, is speaking out against him? Why seemingly anybody not on the party payroll has nothing good to say about this guy? I can't believe he was even a teacher. Forget vice presidential candidate. Can you imagine that guy in charge of anything? The military? And you think that's bad? Consider this. The first decision Kamala Harris had to make in her run for leader of the free world was her number 2. All the people in the world. She could have chose anybody. She chose this guy?